We're live. Now we're
Okay,
live on YouTube.
excellent. Good evening. This is Dave Messina, where I'm here with Dan Oakes, and just behind one of those videos is Blunty. He's hanging out, but he's feeling the wrath of Discord as I have felt evening after evening after evening after evening. With
And don't
I
forget.
have changed, and who else?
Oh, don't forget Alex is here as well.
Oh, I
He's
didn't
not on
realize. I'm
video.
Oh,
sorry.
Yep, there's
yeah, I
Alex.
Okay,
just went on video tonight.
no problem.
What's your
Welcome.
excuse? You don't have
Uh,
to have one.
in a hotel room for at IO,
He's
so I can't stay
racing.
the whole time.
Oh,
He's
okay.
racing in the streets.
Nice.
Excellent. Welcome, Alex. Alex is famous on Instagram. Okay.
So Dave,
So,
what are the top topics that we're planning to talk about for our meeting this
well,
week?
so we've got remote ID. We'll take that one right on the top of the agenda. I know that's top of folks' minds. I did want to make sure that we talk about Flight Fest, and there were 3 to 4 of the core team there in Ohio, and so my thanks to our members. We use the membership funds for IT and travel and some equipment, and so that allowed us to be in one place, which is the first time 3 and then 4 of us were together, and that was fantastic. And I think back to a senior manager who I worked with in 1981 who said, Messina, there is no replacement for being there. And that is so true. So it was fantastic to not only be at flight test, which we can chat a little bit later, but my thanks to having 4 of the 7 of us together physically. And
And
so everyone knows we get to, when on the off week we do these town halls every other week. On the off week we get together as a team for a business meeting. So we do see a lot of each other, but it's typically electronically.
Josh, who usually leads these meetings, is unavailable this week. I don't see Rob either. I don't know if he's got one of his crazy excuses.
No,
Not crazy, but
no, he's
exciting
got.
excuses or not this week.
It's not exciting, but it's important. So he's teaching, and he'll be able to dial in a little later.
Okay.
Very good. So Remote ID Flight Fest, and then the 2023 FAA Reauthorization. We've got some updates on that. Some hopefully some good work by the AMA. We'll chat about that. So I don't think we have consensus on that, much like remote ID topics, but we can get there.
All right. Well,
Starting
how
with
do you want to start on remote ID then?
my thought is I wanted to go through some issues, the activities and accomplishments that we've done, and then a posit or put forward what the FPV position is now. To everyone on the call, we've not had an opportunity to go through and create a single document. So among us, we really work to consensus. We try to listen to the community, seek input, and then gain consensus among the 7 of us before we put something out as the FPVFC position. So we can get there and talk about it among us.
He's making a reference to a video game, probably.
Ah.
I think. That's my guess. He's being entertaining.
Okay. Yeah, I'm probably 2 generations out to understand the reference. So we wanted to quick go through what we feel are the issues, and we've seen and looked at a ton of remote ID videos. A number of them are posted on or the thumbnails are posted on our FAA regulation channel in our Discord. And I've asked if you post a video and you have the opportunity to watch the video, could you add in a couple of the key points? What are the key issues that the individuals are bringing out? What are the key ideas that they had? One of the videos that I watched was by Super Deluxe, a team on the West Coast, and they brought forward a couple good ideas. One of which was gosh, it would they feel that the FAA may scapegoat individuals, and it would be great if someone put together a lawyer or legal defense fund because we can anticipate that someone is going to be dragged in. They also had the premise that remote ID will be solved in the U.S. courts and not on global YouTube. So that was, I thought, insightful. So if you're posting up a video anywhere on any of our social media, please add a couple points. Not just a copy. Oh, saw this video. Yep, we saw it too. But what do you think? What made sense to you? What resonates with you? So to me, and starting the list is the first issue is the location of the remote pilot is also part of remote ID message element. So, of course, it's a static element with a recreational remote ID, and if you're using a standard remote ID like a Nevada, it's a dynamic. So if you as the pilot or operator are moving around with a standard remote ID, it will sense your movement, and that will be part of the remote ID element. With a recreational or broadcast module, it's static. It's the takeoff location, but it's still, unless you start moving, it's a good indication of where you are as the pilot. And Vic Moss has taken this as a cause celeb, and rightfully so. We've had a number of Part 107 pilots across the country assaulted, and he's taken this to the FAA numerous times. Every conversation Vic has with the FAA, he brings this up. We thank him for that. So that to us is a serious issue. We know it falls on deaf ears so far, and we know that the answer coming from the FAA is that this is because of a DHS, Department of Homeland Security requirements. The issues that under the issues, the second area is that we really feel that there should be exceptions for FPV racing for extended video line of sight. I'll define that in a minute. And then shielded operations. So EV loss is something that we talked about in the Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee, and it is beyond visual line of sight that it's common sense. So I can fly a bando, and so momentarily my drone is not in sight. I can fly behind a building momentarily, and that's not a problem. That,
Is
of
there
course,
any kind of specific distance listed for EV loss, or
trying to remember. Yes, is the
yeah,
short answer.
I thought they were sort of an agreed upon distance, but that I'm sure that's up for debate.
Yes,
Everybody has a different definition, but I thought it was pretty far.
I think it was 2 miles, which was consistent with the Pathfinder report, which was 2.3 miles. I think it's in that magnitude. It was much farther than we had anticipated.
Yeah, so if you think of an EV loss operation, so basically, if you're flying anywhere within 2 miles of yourself, don't consider that beyond your visual line of sight. That's all should be visual line of sight rules.
Right. Now in the UK, they're changing visual line of sight to be that you have to be able to recognize the orientation of the drone. So wouldn't surprise me if the FAA tries to adopt that. But that's not the case right now.
We've definitely heard FAA employees feel that way.
Yes. The third area.
You guys mind if I chime in on that real quick?
Please.
So I was telling you guys last week, I actually work in the commercial and R&D, like scientific environment for drones and such. So I fly much bigger, heavier, longer range, etc. And one of the rules actually for BVLOS stuff does do the same thing. I believe is what you're saying the UK is you do have to maintain that you can see the aircraft and may be able to at least make an educated guess of what orientation it's actually in.
Yes.
So I wouldn't be surprised if they bridge that gap over to the hobby side for BVLOS stuff, in exactly like you guys are saying,
Great.
to where you have to see that.
Yep. Yeah, and in fact, it is a part of the safety guidelines that were it's written up in Advisory Circular 9157C, my favorite document, where they talk about orientation of and that was under night flight. But I mean, this is getting to be a thing, and we can sense a pattern. A third area.
Um,
Go
real
ahead,
quick,
Bunty.
you also mentioned, so you said we want exceptions for FPV racing, which we feel should have its own carve out because it's
Yep.
its own separate event, and hopefully we can get an event carve out in general. I think we would like that as well. That sort of more goes on the FRIA topic, but also shielded operations for people who don't know. Right, shielded operations is basically I don't know the exact definition, but basically I think about it like in the places where it's not obvious that you would have aircraft flying. Like if I'm in my backyard under the tree line, like there shouldn't be aircraft present in that area. Or if I'm at the park under the tree line, right, there shouldn't be an aircraft there. And the idea should be that because that's shielded from, those aircraft, then that should be a place I can fly, right?
Right, and that's a man-made or natural structure, so a tree or a building. And so the idea is that you would fly under the top of that building, an equivalent AGL or above ground level to the top of that building, and then out a certain distance from the building. The BVLOS ARC had a recommendation of, was ridiculous, was 50 feet.
Maybe
So,
100, but something relatively close.
And then in New Zealand, they have this as part of their rules, and theirs is 400. So we think 400 feet is a lot more sensible. Thanks, Bunty.
No.
Good catch.
Yeah, and
I drifted past that definition.
the other unfortunate thing too is that so far we've seen sort of the response because we got the BVLOS request for responses. I can't remember what it's called, but basically they put out the BVLS document that had a bunch of questions in it for people. And it seemed like in part of that document there was they were suggesting that you would still need detect and avoid. And so part of our issue here for shielded operations, I think we wouldn't want to have to add specific hardware so that we have detect and avoid for aircraft.
Good point.
Yeah.
Absolutely the case. And it was the comments on the BVLOS document that was, due June 14, and we submitted comments on June 12. Yep.
Yes.
Good. Alex, any additions, comments, or edits?
Nope.
Okay.
And
Sounds good.
over on YouTube, XJet's just giving us the definition in New Zealand that for shielded operations, it's no higher than the tallest object and no more than 100 meters or 330-ish feet from that object.
Great.
So, if we translated that to like no higher than the tallest object and no more than 400 feet, that's sort of what we've been advocating for.
Right. And shielded ops, as we mentioned 2 weeks ago, is something that we've been pushing for 2 years and plus, and it is part of the BVLOS recommendations. So we're seeing this more and more, and it was also part of an FAA study out to 5 universities. So that's positive. Next item was we support FRIA first, and the issue here is the FRIA process. The FRIA process is broken. I had a good question today. Someone asked, "So, what are you doing with, how do you handle an application?" So we're submitting applications. We're telling the applicants, so as everyone, just to go over this same subject. Unless it's an educational institution, an application for a FRIA, an FAA recognized identification area has to be placed through a community-based organization. We're one of the 4 CBOs, so we can submit applications. The process is not working in our view. So we are working with the FAA to try to resolve the myriad of issues in the process.
And one of those issues is they're just outright rejecting a FRIA application if it looks like it is like personal property in a residential area. They just say, nope, you can't have a backyard FRIA. That's not an option. And we don't think that's right.
Right. Like, for example, one of the applications is a a backyard, but it happens to be 5 acres and happens to be owned by the head of a multi-GP chapter, and the plans are to run multi-GP FPV racing at this location. Plenty of room, not an issue, not a noise issue. So we also know, and we do not have this confirmed, but we're pretty sure that the Programmatic Environmental Assessment FRIA, the document that was released in May, if I'm getting my dates right, or it was, I think, April with a May 3 comment period, listed that definition around FRIAs. Anything else, Blunty
Yeah,
or
so
Alex, on
we should
FRIAs?
just continue that thought that with the FRIA gosh, I can't say that for whatever reason. But for those people who haven't been here for all of our meetings, it's our belief that the FAA can't authorize or do final approval of any FRIAs yet until that other document has its full 90-day period expired. And we think that's like mid-August or something. Then they can actually approve some of them. But before that, they can definitely reject things that they just outright know aren't passing their requirements yet. So we don't know of anything that's approved, and it's not going to happen yet. But they definitely have rejected things for other reasons.
Right, and
Yeah, and then
we're nervous about the FRIA PIA because if you have a new field, it could possibly kick off an environmental impact study, which is extraordinarily expensive and long time.
Bunty, you were going to say something?
Yeah, so basically, the only exception to that is the FRIA PEA has a section that if it's essentially something about if it's an existing flying site, that it can be, basically because people have already been doing things there, you can ignore a large part of that process. And we don't know, we're assumingly, from what we've seen and how we know these things have been done, we're assuming that it's been written as such so that the AMA can bypass their fields through this process. But we don't know necessarily how they'll apply this to every other situation, right?
Yeah, it depends on how you read those words. And exists someplace that people are currently flying. Okay, I'm currently flying in my backyard, so that counts as an existing flying site, right? Or I'm sure the FAA won't see it that way.
Yeah, as with many of these other wordings in these bills and things and rules, it's very vague and is up to interpretation typically. Meat asked, did the wording of the bill say it had to be non-residential? It did not say it had to be non-residential.
The advisory circular did have language in it that said that this is tended. There was a weasel worded couple of sentences that said that they would likely not approve a personal residence, and there was a leaning toward an area that was used by a group, and so it's like,
yeah. So and a reminder that advisory circulars are not rulemaking documents. They're more of like a way for us to understand how they're interpreting and what they're recommending.
Right.
It's not rulemaking, but because the wording is so vague originally, it becomes rulemaking in such that they're kind of telling us, like, here's how we're going to judge these things because we have the room to judge them this way.
Right. Yeah, and so we have mandates from Congress. Congress is the only body in this country that can make laws. We have agencies that make rules, and the rules violation of a rule can result in a civil penalty, not a criminal. That's where laws come in. So we will try to make sure that our language is consistent with that. So this came out of a rule, and then an NAC, and as just as Blunty said, not a rule. Okay, then the next one is go ahead.
One thing I wanted to add with FRIAs is, as of now, I've had at least 3 FRIAs denied, one of which is the one we talked about. Another one was my backyard, which was expected to get a timeline on when the FAA would start looking at it. So the FAA is actively looking at it. Another one was, I don't remember what it was, but I think it was the same general issue of backyards. Oh, it was Joshua Bardwell's.
Bardwell.
Yeah, and his being a backyard and not really being a community flying site. However, I do have 2 free applications that are under review and have not been denied yet, which
Yeah.
I think is a good sign, at least, saying that those are more than likely to get approved
Right.
because they
And so-
haven't been denied yet through an automatic denial process that the FAA seems to have.
Right. And you're making a great point, Alex, in terms of the timeline to approval. When we first spoke with the FAA, they said, well, we have no service level of agreement on how quickly we will handle these applications, but we're hoping that it's within 4 months. It turns out it was closer to about 6 months before we heard even the first peep, and there's still a fair number of applications that were submitted longer than 6 months ago and have had absolutely no comment, no response, no hey we got it, hey we're working, nothing. It's a part of the broken process. Okay, I'm just reading a post. Okay, let me get back to this. All right, thank you for jumping in, Alex and Blunty. One of the areas I did want to mention, and this bridges to a later topic of the 2023 FAA Reauthorization Act, is broadcast remote ID is something we really don't like. We've been working against it, but network remote ID is really bad, and we feel immediately damaging to recreational UAS, unmanned aircraft systems, all drones, all RC aircraft, due to the cost. You have to carry another cell phone line or service in order to provide network ID. Network remote ID is mentioned as a requirement in the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2023 no fewer than 5 times. So there's obviously a number of organizations, probably lobbies, probably companies, that are pushing for network remote ID, and notably as a required technology for beyond visual line of sight, as well as unmanned traffic management. So
And just
go ahead.
Just to be clear, so we're talking about, currently we're talking about broadcast remote ID. That's what will be required in September. Broadcast remote ID is a local broadcast, and then anybody with the app active or anybody with a listening station can pick up that data, and then that data will be recorded about where you were and your serial number and your information. Network ID is essentially you need to have an active connection to a network. So that means like a phone like 4G or active on a local Wi-Fi or something like that, so that you are constantly broadcasting that remote ID information to a server, and then that server is sending back information, so that everybody knows where you're at actively across the world.
And a lot of that seems even worse if you have to talk to a server and get approval before you can even leave the ground, meaning you can't fly if you don't have good Wi-Fi coverage, good cell phone coverage, a strong data connection of some sort. And obviously a lot of the people who are pushing for this don't live in places like I do, where you go out into the nearest trails or hills and there's no cell phone signal. You have no way, I mean, unless you're going to carry like a Starlink satellite dish with you and wait for it to set up and connect, like you're not getting a network connection out there. And that's where a lot of people fly.
And for anybody who wasn't following this whole remote ID process, the original proposed, the NPRM for remote ID, included this network remote ID. So we can see at least what we think they were going to do, right, or what they plan to do and how they would lay it out. And what we saw before was exactly what Dan is describing, where you literally on your own property, 5 acres into your field, would still need to have some kind of network access remote ID to fly your drone legally. That was what the original rules were, right?
And what else we saw in the remote ID rules and stuff, there was a lot of network remote ID, not yet, as in sure, this go around it's not there, but we're going to still keep trying, and like what we're seeing with this next Reauthorization Act, it's being pushed very hard, and we have to continuously fight against it.
Yeah, I'm not just to be clear, the original wording didn't say they had to do network remote ID. I think it was like network or broadcast. There was a sort of an optional
I thought
thing
it was
with
like
the
an
hurt now.
and, but
Correct. The first, the NPRM was and. The proposal from the remote ID ARC was or. The FAA changed that to an and. And so, great news that from the NPR Notice for Public Rulemaking document to the final rule of remote ID, network got eliminated, and the FAA went exclusively with broadcast remote ID.
got eliminated
Gotcha.
for now.
Right.
Right, and I
For
think
now.
a big concern here is also that the 2023 FAA Reauthorization Act specifically calls out that network remote ID, and it's it's naming it, and it's saying this is what we need to move to. So there's not more, like if you could think about it, there's not like flex room there. Like they're gonna have to implement some form of a network remote ID if this goes through.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the mandate to the FAA. It says network remote ID. So this is going to be an issue. And some of the discussion we've had initially on this list of issues, this is an area certainly that we feel is an intrusion on personal freedoms, and so this is a step too far. And that is this being network remote ID, and that is. Just as Blunty accurately pointed out, that's part of the future, not the today or not the September 16, 2023 issue, but something we anticipate will be added and is in the 2023 FAA Reauthorization Act as a mandate to the FAA.
I guess I would say remote ID itself is a step too far, but network remote ID is a whole nother level of stepping too far.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so those are the issues. Blunty, Alex, any comments or any additions on the issues? Or Dan, of course, I can see you. So I apologize if it's sounding like I'm not querying you as well.
I would just throw out there really quick that I'm also concerned that even with broadcast remote ID, that there will be, at least in some locations, people recording that and sending it to the internet. So it's not the same as network remote ID where you can't fly if you don't have it, but the history of your flight could still easily be recorded for the world to see forever if you're somewhere where someone's tracking that information.
Right. And a good analogy is, if someone were to say, that's impossible, that would never happen. Well, search on FlightAware, and this is a really clever company. And if you want to listen and monitor ADS-B, where aircraft are in your area, pick up an inexpensive setup for FlightAware and sign in, and that's exactly what they're doing. Is they're sniffing all ADS-B, which is a broadcast from aircraft, and it's their squawk of location, their identification, where they're going, etc. And you have that for much more than the much larger radius, like the entire country, instead of just a 25-mile radius of the ADS-B transmitter. So it's happening today with other broadcast technology. Dan makes a very good point. Okay. The second area I wanted to mention. And
did Alex have something he was going to jump in with?
Oh, I'm sorry, Alex. Didn't mean to.
I
I was jumping in to say I didn't have anything.
Oh,
okay.
Sorry.
Point of order. I don't have any additional comments. I just wanted to. So the second area. So we've discussed issues. We've got. Then I'd like to talk through the activities and accomplishments, as well as, and then third, what's the tentative or hypothetical set of positions. So we won't belabor the point. The first list of accomplishments, and we need to update it, is on our website. And we've been at this for 4 years, and we have gotten some changes made. And notably, our involvement in remote ID, from a full disclosure perspective, is that I'm a working member on the ASTM Remote ID Working Group. We meet again tomorrow. There's an FAA recommended change to the means of compliance. We worked, Dan and I sat on the Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee, and we are working with Flight Test on a broadcast remote ID module. We remain all volunteer, and we are a not-for-profit. So we welcome any discussion on how we operate and how we put forward. But there's a long list of accomplishments on our website. In addition to those, we will be evaluating remote ID modules that we can get a hold of, and we will not be doing exotic lab tests, but practical tests. How easy are they to set up? How big is it? How much does it weigh? We can probably measure the power draw. What's the physical size? What are the antenna requirements, etc. And then run some practical external tests. For example, Alex is asking for several modules each time we evaluate a remote ID broadcast module, so they can put them in a race. So what's the interference if we do have to have a broadcast remote ID module for a racer? Are they interfering with other racers in as much as they're flying in very close proximity?
Yeah, what happens if you get 8 people flying around a race course at the same time? Everybody's got remote ID. Is it going to cause just unexpected issues with transmitters, or what's it going to look like for the remote ID receiver? Is that even going to work? Yeah, who knows? But we'll see what it does.
We're also will continue to push on things like extended visual line of sight, shielded operations. We will continue to push the 1 kilogram lower bound for registration and manufacturing requirements. That went nowhere in the FAA Reauthorization Act, unfortunately. And we will participate in recreational events to ensure we're listening to the community, and we will also, we can mention, or hopefully we'll remember to mention, we had the opportunity to invite and host a senior FAA executive to Flight Fest. So Rob Robertson and I spent most of Friday escorting Rob Lowe around Flight Fest, and it was a privilege. And so Rob is a guy who's responsible for one of the 9 regions in the FAA, so not involved in unmanned aircraft systems, but has everyone in Region 9, which is the 5 states around Texas. If you work for the FAA, you work for Rob Lowe. So this is an individual with over 30 years experience in the FAA, and good insight. And Rob was able to put a set of goggles on him, and very positive. So
and not only does he work for the FAA, right? He's a model aviation pilot and has been for a long time. And
over 40 years experience being an RC pilot, so it was completely at home at Flight Fest.
And even though he doesn't oversee anything related to drones and drone regulation, he's still a good friend to have in the FAA.
Knows a lot of folks, and so he's also very big in FAA STEM, which is important to us. Okay, so those are our activities and accomplishments. Blunty, Alex, anything I missed or you wanted to add?
No, I just want to be super clear though, for people, if you want to know what we're doing and we're not clear enough, or for whatever, you want to know what's going on, or you want to ask us what we're doing about a topic, or you want to ask why we're not commenting on this, or there's whatever you want to do. I just want to be clear. We're super open. You can email any of us. All our emails are on the website, or you can contact me at any of my places as well, on Discord or somewhere. You can email us at fpvfc.org with our names. I just want to make sure everybody knows that the info's there for you if you'd like it.
Welcome, Rob.
And
you're
he's
muted.
Somehow muted.
Let's see if you can get that audio working, Rob.
Doesn't look like he's actually muted in Discord, but nothing's coming through. It's all right. You've got 20 more minutes to see if you can get it working.
So the FPV FC position then is so where what do we think is critically important? First, the philosophy of FRIA first, and so by that, what we mean is the FAA has estimated that that there is a need for approximately 4,000 FRIAs. Our estimate is it's closer to 79,000. So if you have one FRIA for 20 UAS operators, that equals 79,000. So we have a big difference in what the estimate is, and that's something we'll be working on. But the idea is that we would like people to fly in FRIAs. And if that doesn't work, then we would be suggesting the use of a remote ID broadcast module to be compliant. We also suggest to be aware of the regulations. For example, I was chatting with, at Flight Fest, a commercial pilot, and flies small airlines for a living. And if he gets a violation on his Part 107 or something to do with 44809 recreational, that can impact. The FAA can pull his airline pilot certificate. So being aware of the regulations we feel is important. It's your choice whether you choose to comply or not. Our view is we want to make it as simple as possible to comply, and also educate you on what the facts are in not only the regulations, but from everything we know in terms of enforcement, and those are enforcement actions as well as civil violation costs.
Just to
Go
throw
ahead.
in there real quick. Also, as far as be aware of regulations, if you want to know why a regulation is a regulation, or where did it come from, or where what's the wording in the law, is there room for stuff?
Why
Like, that's all.
250 grams?
Yeah, that stuff's all good conversation to have. And if we don't have resources on it that we can point you to, we're happy to explain why and add those resources to our website if it's deemed appropriate or whatever. You know what I mean? I just want to make sure people are aware that we're super open to doing stuff like that. And yeah, we would encourage more communication like that if you guys are interested.
Yeah, the whole reason FPV Freedom Coalition got started is a group of us all got together and openly decided we needed to start working together and push the FAA in the right direction. We haven't been as successful as we wanted to, but we're happy to be completely open about what we're trying to do.
The fourth position is that this one has me very concerned, and that is that we will fight network remote ID at every opportunity. And as I mentioned, there are multiple mentions of it in the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2023, which is a good segue to the Reauthorization Act of 2023. The AMA has a blog post out, and so the fourth community-based organization has been working closely with Congress, and they have worked with several. I think they're House representatives. There's an amendment out there. We have the link. We can put it up. And in fact, I know it was already up in this channel on Discord. But they're asking for folks to write in to their congressional representatives and senators, and in particular, if your congressional representative or senators are members of either of the aviation subcommittee, this is really important. Some of the highlights of the amendment that they've included is a big one to me, which is that FRIAs can be self-declared by a CBO. So that says that all the things that I was whining and complaining about in the FRIA process, we could take that on and start approving FRIAs. That's great. So what has to be done for us to get there? Well, the amendment has to be incorporated into the bill that gets passed, and I'm pretty sure it's the House. Then the Senate needs to pass their bill. Then the House and the Senate get together in conference because it's a bicameral bill. They have to agree and adjudicate any differences on a bill. And then the single bill coming out of that conference goes back to each chamber. They vote on it again, assuming approval, goes to the president for his signature. That becomes law. Then that mandate, or the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2023, goes to the FAA. How long do we think the FAA might take to update their actions on FRIAs? Took them 4 years from the 2018, so I doubt it will be in 2023. So, but that said, that's a little negative, but that said, that is fantastic. If that happens, our thanks to the AMA, and we will applaud them loud and often if we can get that done. And
Yeah,
I was going to add that we will go through the blog post carefully, and if we feel appropriate, we will put together a call to action in support of theirs.
the part that has me really concerned about the self-declared FRIAs is that the wording says self-declare FRIAs to sponsored sites that meet criteria developed by the administrator in coordination with community-based organizations. And I have a pessimistic view that we would be able to agree with the FAA on requirements for actually being able to self-declare anything as a FRIA.
Right.
Perhaps the AMA would be able to say, oh yeah, we're going to be able to self-declare these specific events we do 3 times a year, and it'll meet those requirements. But those will be like the only things that'll ever meet those requirements.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you, Dan. The proof will be in the pudding. We'll see how detailed.
They don't even have. They don't even appear to have requirements internally properly. You know what I mean? Like I struggle to see them defining proper criteria. Like, what would this process actually look like? I don't know. I just struggle to figure out what this working in communication with the administrator to self-approve free is. Like, I struggle to find out what this would be. Meet as a wording is very wide wording, and I agree. I think I would worry that this will be taken in, in I don't know what you call it, but they'll just take the wording in, absorb it, and then essentially nothing will change because they'll be giving us a list of exactly what they are using to deny. Maybe it'll just be a little more clear. But that's a pessimistic view. The only reason I'm not pessimistic is because we've been working with the FAA and gotten shot down so many times that it's hard to be optimistic, right?
This could be anywhere from they completely delegate the FRIA process to CBOs to nothing changes. And somewhere along that spectrum, or this does not get incorporated into the final bill. And so there are a lot of hurdles on this. But that said, kudos to the AMA for the creation of this amendment. It's tangible. You can look at it. It's written down. It's a good start.
Yeah, a bit
it's not that
disappointing.
Hard to send,
Go ahead, Blunty.
Sorry, I was just going to say it's not that hard to send a letter either. So like, it's not the end of the world to say like, hey, we're going to support this or whatever. So we'll, like we said, we'll look through all of the text and make sure we're good. And then put out a blast if we feel it's appropriate. But again, it's not like we're burning a bridge here trying to do this. It's another some emails we can send.
I'm very disappointed. I don't see any mention of increasing the registration limit from 250 grams to something higher.
Yeah.
Which obviously, if you contacted your congressman and you gave him this information, you could add that as well in your own personal letter.
Right. Yeah, and it was mentioned in the AMA's FAQ on this topic where they said, will there be the lower bound raised to 1 kilogram? And the response is no, neither the House or the Senate wanted to take that up, which is very disappointing to us. Meet has a comment on Discord. The FAA seems to lack actual definitions for a large amount of their terms, and that is absolutely the case. And having worked for several years on the ASTM working committee with members of the rule-making team from the FAA in the virtual room, absolutely the way they want to work, and they intentionally steered away from specific and precise language many times. So yes, that's absolutely the case. Gives them latitude. Okay, that was the remote ID, I'm exhausted.
Other questions about remote ID that people might have. There's obviously a lot of people talking about it, a lot of YouTube videos. There's some amount of misinformation going around, but not too much. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of nuance to it. There's a lot of complications. People forget that Part 107 operations doesn't matter the size, and recreational
I'll,
operations are slightly different.
I
Right.
think
And we
part
hear
of
things
the
like, it's the law, you're a criminal. No, and no. It's a rule, and you can be guilty of a civil violation.
so
I have a
yeah, I
question.
think one of the hardest things is actually understanding like what the rules are at a time for the person and where you're flying and how it's going if you're not like absorbed in stuff all the time.
That's well said. Blunty, there was a question from the group.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just curious if like the this remote ID is going to be transmitting some kind of signal. Is that signal has that been cleared through the FCC?
Yes, it has. It's a Bluetooth 5 beacon, and it also simultaneously will transmit Bluetooth 4. So no issue with the FCC.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Just for a little more detail, basically all the devices have to be FCC certified, and then those devices get approved to be remote
Right.
ID devices, and then that remote ID transmission is an ASTM approved process, which is like
Right.
a board that like does these standards, so that everybody kind of has the same broadcast.
Right. To be explicit, the Bluetooth broadcast transmitters have to be part 15 approved by the FCC.
Yeah, and like Meat's asking, this is a public band, so it's Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, which are signals that your cell phone can detect.
Right. There's no.
Depending on
This
the
is
phone.
not private or allocated spectrum.
Anybody else have other questions and things they're wondering about remote ID?
So I'm trying to think.
XJet's asking, are broadcast remote ID units self-declared as compliant, or is there a government department vetting them?
Well, there is the FAA. The way that it works is that the FAA has approved a means of compliance, which is essentially a specification. The manufacturer of a standard remote ID aircraft or a remote ID broadcast module has to then comply with the means of compliance, which is a specification that includes bench testing and field testing, as well as the extensive definition of what's the message element is, or how it's transmitted, on and on and on for hundreds of pages. Then the manufacturer declares to the FAA that they have gone through all of the bench testing, that we meet the compliance, that it's part FCC part compliant. Here is the serial number range, et cetera, et cetera. So that all the testing is done by the manufacturer. The FAA then signs off on that in a declaration of compliance. I would really never call that vetting. It is very close to a rubber stamp by the FAA, which is really very troubling to someone who has spent last 2 years working carefully to the spirit of the rule and trying to create a robust broadcast module, only to have any clone that sends in a clone company that sends in a declaration of compliance get a stamp of approval as well.
So let's say you're an unscrupulous Chinese company looking to make some money. You could tell the FAA, oh yeah, this follows all the rules, sell it. It could do absolutely nothing close to being correct. You could get in trouble because you're flying it and somebody stops you and like looks at it closer and realizes, hey, this isn't doing what it's supposed to.
The good news on that is the only individual that would get in trouble is the manufacturer, because the manufacturer certified in writing with a signature that their test equipment satisfied the requirements. So the FAA would then add, so the FAA likes to be responsive to incidents. So if there's an incident, a safety incident in all likelihood, an accident, someone was injured, massive property damage, someone was killed, then they'll open an investigation, and it will be incumbent on the manufacturer to resolve any issues and potentially update or refresh all of the broadcast modules or standard remote ID subsystems in the field.
And as has been mentioned quite a few times, there's nothing in this signal that prevents anyone from spoofing it or pretending to be somebody else's drone or just broadcasting a random serial number or creating a broadcast of thousands of drones in the area that are all fake. There's nothing the FAA can do to stop that.
That's right. And would that be a violation of the regulations? Yes. Is there the limit of tamper resistance is just that. It is yet another vague phrase from the FAA, so that we do know that a completely open source solution to remote ID would not be approved. But short of that, there's not a lot of protections.
Let's see. Shawnee D was asking if there's any updates on the self-built options for Part 107 flights. Alex replied, no, there's no update. So we can reiterate again, if you build a drone today and you're planning on building that to fly a Part 107 operation, you can't satisfy remote ID by buying a module and putting it on there. You have to have a fully standard remote ID compliant drone where your transmitter transmits your location through the drone at all times, and that's extremely difficult or currently impossible for any hobbyist to jump through all those hoops and make that happen.
Right. Now there are ways to get it done, and so there are a number of smaller drone manufacturers across the country who are wrestling with this, and so we've been talking to some of these folks, with suggestions, and there's some great. We've been in touch with Betaflight development and Ardu pilot development, and so there's some great suggestions. It is a non-trivial effort, just as Dan said. So if you're creating your own, you're building your own DIY drone, it's going to be Part 107. It has to be standard remote ID. It is a non-trivial effort. And if you have more questions on that, it's a topic we have studied in quite some depth. Would welcome the questions. And the comment, the FAA will do exactly what Homeland Security tells them to. That has been our finding, and that was exactly the example in the vertical accuracy of the standard remote ID ground control station. So the location of the operator has a vertical accuracy of 15 feet requirement. That's the tightest GPS location of any vehicle in the world, and by an order of magnitude.
And that's basically because they want to know if you're flying from the middle of a building to know exactly which floor you're on, right? Or at least narrow it down pretty close.
Exactly, right. Which floor?
Bitsbytes points out in chat, you would need to file a declaration of compliance. If you were attempting to do this and you wanted to go through all the hoops and do all the crazy paperwork and stuff to get yourself done, you could do all of that, but it would also subject you to the liability that would normally be on the manufacturer, right? Because like you talked about, because if that stuff is wrong, it's on the manufacturer if it's wrong, and now it's on you.
And there's the next step of liability, because a standard remote ID aircraft is Subpart F, which is a vaguely defined manufacturing and production set of requirements from the FAA. And it's that vagueness that freaks out all of the advanced air mobility people when they're trying to get type certification created. And they come up against essentially a vague set of manufacturing requirements. But Bitsbytes is absolutely correct. So there is a lower level of liability with a broadcast module. It is not subject to Subpart F manufacturing requirements. A good thing.
Jason on YouTube is asking if there's any idea what the options are for Flight Fest next year, since the field won't be a FRIA, they assume. Did that come up at all this year during Flight Fest?
Yes. Great question.
I assume the answer is we don't know yet, but they're working on multiple possibilities.
Right. Yes, that is exactly right. We don't know. We we will work with FDCA and Flight Test to do anything we can to help. They're working it. This is a topic of conversation every time we talk to the FAA, and so this is so. What are you doing about large events? And prior to the issuance of 9157C, the FAA said we will handle. We are working on a process that will support a FRIA-like capability for events, and that will include FPV racing. Then we got 9157C, and it explicitly excluded those things. So
Yeah, it was a long time ago they mentioned they were working on something for races, and we've heard
They have their-
nothing since then.
right, they have their best people working on it.
Another thing with that is Flight Fest is at Fury Airport, which is an airport. It's a private airport, but still an airport nonetheless. We've also applied for another airport that's local to me where there's flying at. And we're going to see what the FAA thinks of FRIAs also being airports, which will be interesting.
Was that one rejected yet?
It has not been rejected yet, but I think it's next on the list for review.
Okay.
Yeah,
Alex, are those
my,
already filed as fixed sites? Because they have to be fixed sites first if they're in class airspace, right?
No, it's uncontrolled airspace. It's a private airport.
Oh, it is uncontrolled. Okay.
Yeah, and I've got my local AMA field.
Non-towered.
My local AMA club has exactly the same situation. Our
Also-
flying field is a long-term location, and it is on a private airport.
And also for controlled airspace, it does not. Fixed site is for over 55-pound aircraft. A letter of agreement is for controlled airspace, but a letter of agreement is not needed for a FRIA in controlled airspace.
Right. Yeah. And for those of you reading Bits Bytes, he's got this exactly right. Manned aircraft are only required to have altimeter accuracy within within 75 feet. As far as he's aware, remote ID is 15 feet at 95% confidence for the control station and 150 feet at 95% confidence for the drone. Yep, absolutely agree.
Crazy that little tiny drones have to be more accurate with their GPS than a
Right,
airplane
and of
carrying
course
passengers.
Yeah. Wait, 15.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
my mic working now?
Yeah, we can
Yes,
hear
it
you.
is.
Awesome. I restarted it and it's working now. But hey, Alex, I think you missed this. I believe this was on Friday, Dave. Maybe on Friday. There was an AMA rejection on an established flying field. They rejected it because there was a gravel road on the private property that led to the field. And the reviewer's comments was that there was a roadway, albeit a private gravel driveway, that led up to the flying field. That was the reason for that rejection. Again, that was on the AMA side.
Did the AMA publicly state that somewhere?
No, the guy that one of the guys that came through our table talking to us, he showed me his rejection email.
Oh, okay.
That's right. No roads to your FRIA. Has to be you have to off-road in. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like Bits Bytes has copied in. This looks like part of the MOC, the means of the remote ID means of compliance, which was is ASTM standards 3411 and 3586. Okay.
Someone's saying, well, what if the road is gated? That's part of the issue we have with the FRIA process is they just reject things, and then your FRIA application's done and gone, and you have to submit a new one to even argue that, oh, by the way, like the road you see on that satellite image either doesn't exist anymore, or it's closed, it's gated, or it's all blocked off when we're having events. Like they don't even give you an opportunity to explain why that's not an issue. They just reject it.
Part of the process that we're very frustrated is normally in a process like this, you get some, that won't work. And then you can edit what you're working on and you're talking to the same human to try to come to a resolution. So far, it's good that it appears that we don't go back to the beginning of a 6-month queue but it's anybody's guess who gets the rota and who's going to work on your FRIA application. So this is part of the really bad, broken process.
As to what Dan was saying, is even the free applications ask for a primary point of contact to be contacted on the FRIA, and in all of the denials we've seen, no one has been contacted.
Yeah, when you're filling out your application, they specifically say, who should we contact if we have questions about your free application? Oh, but by the way, we're just going to ignore them, but put it in here
and
anyway.
what they're also ignoring, and one of the other CBOs was explicitly given tips and techniques on how to fill out the free application. Make sure you fill in the writing, so that there's explaining what the situation is. And it's been our observation that the FAA frequently ignores any of the writing parts of the free application. Again,
Very true.
Part of a broken process.
In the one for the multi-GP chapter that was denied in someone's backyard, we explained that there are races there and it's held at that location, and it was still denied as not a community flying site.
Right.
Ridiculous.
Bits and bytes must be involved in this pretty deeply. Having access to the specs. Okay, it's good. And the more people that know the details, the better we can help other folks. In my own AMA club, I've answered questions. I made sure I'm at a couple of club meetings and just sat and answered questions. And that's helpful. A lot of folks on this call, you're really knowledgeable, and please spread the facts.
Well, I think we've spent almost an hour now on remote ID.
And we are over.
We should probably hit our other topics very briefly and just point out that we're always available to answer anybody's questions about remote ID, whether you send them via email or Discord chat or Facebook or whatever. Anytime you want to ask us questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them the best we can.
So why don't we close on how about one of the articles? There was the one article that was about a sinkhole. There was a young man discovered an overturned car.
Let's see. I think I got that one here.
So Rob, Eagle Eye, picked up on this one instantly.
This the one?
Let's see if we can see it.
Yeah, it says 2 people were trapped upside down in a sinkhole and water was filling their car. A teenager with a drone a teenager with a drone hobby. Okay, so it was a hobbyist. Recreational flyer saved them.
Right. So as you scan through the text, the young man was flying for some period of time, and he flew his drone, and the sinkhole was about 2 miles away from where he was located, beyond visual line of sight. That's what Rob picked up on immediately. So we're hoping that this young man who was responsible for saving 2 people's lives, this is absolutely a drones doing good story. We wanted to close on it because it is a little bit of irony. Hopefully, he does not get an infraction for flying beyond line of sight.
Although it would not be extended beyond visual line of sight, right? Or EV loss.
Yes, that's right. It's within 2.3 miles, and he was, momentarily, the aircraft was out of sight. But there we go. The FAA punishes every good deed. All right. Anything else around the room? Blunty, Alex, of course, Rob and Dan.
Oh, someone's asking for a link for that. Of course, I've got a link for that I can share.
Okay.
We'll have to save our other news items for 2 weeks from now, and we'll have to wait 2 more weeks before we can hear all about your experiences at Flight Fest last weekend, and another 2 weeks till we hear more about the 2023 Reauthorization Act, where that's at.
Yeah.
Although we talked a little bit about that with the amendments from the AMA.
And Yeah, and we'll have a consolidated view of what we think is a good way forward and recommendations for the FPVFC community. And I hunch it's like Blunty said, it's easy enough to send a memo, so chances are we'll be in support. Anything else? Excellent. Thanks for good discussion, good questions, and have a good evening. Take care,
Yep.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody. See you in a
See you
couple
guys
weeks.
later.